I need to tell you something I've never said out loud. When my brother died, everyone was worried about me. Friends called, family showed up, people brought food and sat in my living room waiting for me to break down. And I felt nothing. Not sadness, not grief, not the gut-wrenching agony everyone expected. Just quiet. Like someone turned the volume knob all the way down inside my chest. And when everyone finally left, when the last person walked out and the door clicked shut, I exhaled. Not because I didn't love him. I loved him more than I have language for. But because their presence, their eyes on me, their expectations of how I should grieve, felt like wearing a suit made of sandpaper. The silence they were afraid of, it was the only place I could breathe. And that terrified me, because I realized I'd been this way my entire life. After my ex left, I didn't call anyone. I sat alone in a dark room and felt relief. Not relief that she was gone. Relief that I could finally stop performing the version of myself that another person required. When people ask me, "Don't you get lonely?" I smile and say, "Not really." And they look at me the way you look at someone who just told you they can't feel physical pain. Impressed, and then deeply, deeply concerned. I used to think I was just independent, strong, self-sufficient. The one who doesn't need anyone, and honestly, I was proud of it. Then I learned what was actually happening inside my nervous system. And pride wasn't the right word anymore. If you're someone who feels more at peace alone than you've ever felt with another human being, this is for you. And I need you to stay with me. Because what I'm about to tell you might be the first time anyone has explained why the silence feels like home. And why that should break your heart a little. There's a specific quality to the silence after the last person leaves. And your experience of it is fundamentally different from most people's. For the majority of humans, that silence triggers a biological drop. A subtle spike in cortisol. A reflexive reach for a phone. One hashtag, a primal anxiety whispering. The tribe has dispersed. You're exposed. But for you, the mechanism operates in reverse. When the door closes, the internal noise doesn't spike, it flatlines. The muscles around your jaw, your eyes, your chest, muscles you didn't even know were bracing, finally release. You don't experience the empty room as a void. You experience it as bandwidth. The massive cognitive load of processing micro-expressions, tone shifts, social expectations. It vanishes. And your brain doesn't panic at the vacuum. It expands into it. You can sit in an empty house for days. And the sensation isn't the hollow ache that culture describes. It's structural integrity. You feel like a closed circuit, fully self-contained, complete. You've probably interpreted this as strength, as calm superiority, a distinct lack of neediness that separates you from everyone else's desperate social maneuvering. But what if I told you that silence isn't peace? What if it's a fortress you built so early you forgot you were building it? To understand why you don't get lonely, we have to go back. Back to a time you probably don't remember clearly, or remember too clearly and wish you didn't. At a critical point in your development, your nervous system made a calculation. Not consciously, not with words, but deep in the survival wiring of a brain that was still forming. The calculation was this: relying on other people is an unreliable transaction. Maybe your caregivers were intrusive, always in your space, smothering you with attention that was about their needs, not yours. Maybe they were inconsistent, warm one day, cold the next, so you never knew which parent was walking through the door. Maybe they were simply misattuned, present but not there, in the room but not in your world. And your developing brain did what developing brains do. It adapted. It decoupled your sense of safety from the presence of others. You learned to bypass what scientists call the ventral vagal system, the biological hardware designed for social engagement and co-regulation. And instead, you built a self-contained feedback loop. You became your own ecosystem, your own validation, your own structure, your own soothing. You trained your brain to view other people not as sources of comfort, but as sources of chaotic data that must be managed. You don't get lonely because loneliness is a hunger signal for a nutrient you decided you could manufacture yourself. And for years, that worked. It kept you safe, it kept you standing. But the cost is something you're only beginning to feel. Share this with someone who's always fine alone. They need to hear what that's actually costing them. You operate under the assumption that your solitude is low maintenance, a factory setting, efficient, clean. But physiologically, suppressing the attachment drive is an active, high-energy process. Connection is the mammalian default. To override it requires continuous subterranean exertion. You experience this not as effort, but as the severity of recovery after social contact. It's not just that people are draining. It's that dropping your internal shielding, even slightly, disrupts a rigid balance. And when you retreat to your solitude, you're not resting. You're frantically restabilizing. You're running a complex simulation of safety that depends entirely on your absolute control of the environment. And over years, this accumulates. Your tolerance for unpredictability shrinks. Spontaneity starts feeling like aggression. A surprise phone call triggers a spike of adrenaline that seems excessive for the stimulus. Because your safety depends on prediction. And prediction is only possible in isolation. The cost isn't paid in sadness. It's paid in flexibility. Your world becomes perfectly curated, optimized for your specific cognitive flow, and consequently, incredibly static. The emotional spectrum narrows. The highs get lower, the lows get shallower. You achieve stability by systematically eliminating variables. And other human beings are the ultimate variable. Here's the neuroscience. Your brain has two networks that toggle like a seesaw. The default mode network, the DMN, activates when you're not solving a specific problem. It's where social cognition lives. Thinking about others, replaying conversations, assessing your place in the group. And this is where loneliness is manufactured. A distress signal saying, your social reserves are dangerously low. Then there's the task-positive network, the TPN, instrumental focus, problem solving, systems and objects. Your brain has developed a dominant bias toward the TPN. When you're alone, you don't drift into social rumination. You process information. You systemize. You build. You've rerouted your dopamine rewards. While most humans derive stability from the messy feedback of a group, you derive it from the predictable, linear feedback of competence and control. But here's what's quietly happening in the background. The brain is ruthlessly efficient. It dismantles pathways that aren't routinely activated. Because you've spent years bypassing the circuits of vulnerability, asking for help, co-regulation, being soothed by another person, your brain has begun to designate those capacities as obsolete. You are slowly losing the ability to be deeply moved. You might notice your emotional range has compressed. The sharp peaks of joy, the gut-wrenching lows of sorrow, smoothed into a flat gray line of, I'm fine. You're not depressed. You're muted. Watching the movie of your life through soundproof glass. Drop muted. If you've ever felt like your emotions have a volume limit that won't go past 3, this doesn't stay contained in your solitude. It projects outward into everything. In your career, you become indispensable, not through leadership, but through bottlenecking. You hoard responsibility. You don't delegate. Because delegation means trusting someone else's competence, and your nervous system reads that as a point of failure. You tell yourself it's faster to do it yourself. But the truth is, you can't tolerate the friction of collaboration. Collaboration requires explaining your logic to a mind that isn't yours. So you become the silent workhorse, the lone wolf. People admire you. But notice the texture of that admiration. They respect you, but they don't know how to help you. You've trained them perfectly to leave you alone. And your relationships, this is where it cuts deepest. You're the low-maintenance partner. You never nag, never cling, never start dramatic conflicts. But eventually, they develop a frantic, confusing neediness. They pick fights over nothing. They accuse you of being distant when you're sitting right there. You think it's their insecurity. But here's what's actually happening. They're hitting a glass wall. You offer loyalty, support, presence. But you withhold the one thing that makes intimacy real: need. And in a relationship, refusing to need someone is a form of dominance. It signals you can walk away without a change in your pulse. Your stability makes them feel entirely disposable. Eventually, they leave. Or you detach because they became too much work. And you return to the silence, vindicated in your belief that relationships are fundamentally draining. I know this because I lived it. When my ex left, the thing that scared me wasn't that she was gone. It was how quickly the silence felt comfortable again, like I was slipping back into a shape I'd been holding my whole life. And I remember thinking, if I can lose someone I love and feel relief within 48 hours, what does that make me? Look at your physical body. The absence of loneliness suggests relaxation, but you probably have tension headaches, jaw pain from grinding your teeth at night, digestive issues, chronic tension in places you can't explain. Because you don't co-regulate, you don't use social interaction to lower your cortisol, your body metabolizes all its stress internally. You're a closed system accumulating entropy, and when you finally get sick, you crash hard. Because the only way your body can force a reset is total system failure. Even your leisure is colonized. Your hobbies are solitary, skill-based, optimized. You listen to podcasts at 1.5 times speed. Track your sleep. Gamify your recovery. You cannot simply be. Because being implies a lack of output, a vulnerability to the void. And you must always, always be acquiring, refining, or restructuring. You've turned existence into a project because existing without a project feels like dying. Here's what I need you to hear. And I'm saying this to myself as much as I'm saying it to you. A system that is entirely self-reliant has no redundancy, no backup, no shared weight. When something you can't control finally hits, a sudden illness, a financial collapse, a death, your strength won't bend. It will shatter because you have no practice in leaning, no muscle memory for being held. When the collapse comes, it will be total because you are the only pillar holding up the roof. You thought you were buying freedom. You were purchasing the most expensive form of stagnation there is. A fortress so secure that even you can no longer leave it. Walls so thick they block the light. Safe in a way that is indistinguishable from being dead to the world while still walking through it. When my brother died, the fortress held, not a crack. That's what scared me. Because I realized I hadn't built walls to protect myself from pain. I'd built walls so thick that even grief, even love, couldn't find me inside them. And there's a line in Hurt by Johnny Cash. What have I become, my sweetest friend? Everyone I know goes away in the end. I heard that after the funeral, and for the first time in years, something cracked. Not because of the sadness, but because the song described me. Everyone goes away in the end, not because people are unreliable, but because I engineered a life where leaving was easy and staying was impossible. I know what you're doing right now. You're analyzing this, looking for the protocol, the cognitive reframe, the behavioral adjustment that lets you reintegrate without losing your armor. But that's the final trap. The intellect is the tool you use to build the wall. It cannot be the tool that dismantles it. There is no sterile, safe procedure for re-entering the human ecosystem. To dismantle hyperautonomy requires the one thing your system has spent a lifetime avoiding: the physical sensation of being unshielded, of needing, of being seen in your need. You are standing at a threshold between safety that is suffocating you and vulnerability that terrifies you. The silence of your room is no longer just peace. It's a question. You have proven beyond any doubt that you can survive without anyone. You've won that game. But the question that remains, vibrating in the quiet you've so carefully constructed, is not whether you can continue. We know you can. The question is, if you were to finally set down the weight of this competence, if you let the signal of your own need broadcast outward, who do you believe would actually answer? And the deeper question beneath that one, the one you've been running from your entire life, is whether you believe you're worth answering for. I didn't think I was. For a long time, I didn't think I was. But there's a line in Fix You by Coldplay. Lights will guide you home and ignite your bones. And I will try to fix you. I used to think that song was about weakness, about someone too broken to help themselves. Now I think it's about the bravest thing a human being can do. For 0.5, letting someone try. Sara one nar. Subscribe, because we're talking about the things you've been too self-sufficient to admit you feel. Go 1.5. Share this with someone who's always fine, always strong, always alone. They need to know that their fortress isn't freedom. It's a cage with a very convincing view. Comment one thing you've never asked another person for. Not because you didn't need it, but because needing it felt like failure. And if you're ready, truly ready, to start dismantling the architecture, find a therapist who understands attachment. Not just any therapist. Someone trained in attachment theory, IFS, or somatic work. You've spent your whole life proving you don't need anyone. What if the bravest thing you ever do is admitting that you do? The silence is still there. But now you know what it's really saying. It's asking you to come home, not to the empty room, to yourself, to the version of you that still knows how to need. That child is still in there, and they've been alone long enough.